Well, good morning and welcome to Friday Live here at OHbaby. And this is pretty exciting because this is our first Friday Live in our new studio. So I should introduce our guests, but I'm so excited about our new studio. This is Dr Melanie Woodfield. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mel.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Melanie is a clinical psychologist working with children and young people, and Melanie has also been writing for OHbaby magazine since the very first issue, which is
a while ago,
nearly 10 years. We are nearly 10 years old as a magazine, which is pretty exciting. But it's so great to have Melanie with us this morning, and it's great to be in our new video space. All our furniture has been kindly supplied by Mocha, so shout out to Mocha. Amazing furniture, very comfortable, and as I said yesterday, a flat pack furniture that I managed to put together all by myself, so I'm a little bit proud of that. Didn't even need to call my husband, who is a builder. Sometimes he gets called in to help with flat pack projects, but I managed this by myself. So thank you to Mocha, and thank you to Mel for joining us today. Now we're going to be talking with Mel about tricky behaviour, tantrums, toddlers, timeouts and the like. But you are welcome to ask Dr Melanie any questions you would like. You simply comment underneath the video and I can see it here on the iPad if the technology works for us, which it should do. Yeah, please feel free to ask any questions and we will try and get to those this morning on Friday Live. But Mel, we could just talk about, get this conversation started. Tricky behaviour. As parents, we have no doubt seen some of it already in our own households. But with the younger children under 5s, what can we expect really when it comes to children and their behaviour and the trouble spots?
Yeah. So I think that's a really good question. I think it's really important at the beginning to understand that intense emotions, big feelings, and the associated behaviour is really typical and really normal for young children. Yeah. And it's really normal to have an experience of a lovely sort of placid wee baby who sort of turns 18 months or 2, we hear about the terrible 2s and people think, oh my goodness, what's happened to my child? But actually it's really typical and it's actually a necessary part of their development. Right. To have a period of time where these big feelings show up and kids become a little bit stroppy and non-compliant and oppositional, and it's a crucial kind of part of their development. So let's not panic when that starts to happen. Let's not think that all of our lovely input that we've been giving has kind of gone out the window. Yeah. Chances are your child will settle. Yes.
And I think that's a big issue, isn't it? Is what is normal for parents. They see things and they think, is that
absolutely
normal?
And I think that period is two things. I think it's a challenging period, but it's also an opportunity. If we were reframing it, it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
A learning curve.
Let's come up with all the euphemisms we can come up with to help people feel better about that really challenging time. Look, I think when big feelings show up for young children, for 2-3-year-olds, it's a fantastic opportunity to start emphasising some languaging around feelings. I can see, things like saying to a 3-year-old who's having a wee tantrum, I can see you feel really angry about that. Yeah. And that makes sense because you felt like that was unfair. When I said that or when he took that off you, it felt unfair and now you're angry about that. I get that. Yeah.
So do you need to, sorry I interrupted.
Well, just thinking alongside that message, so that's what we call validation.
Sure.
And validation isn't just a warm, fuzzy, waffly concept. There's a lot of science behind it. Yeah. We all feel better and our feelings are kind of held and contained if somebody understands them and agrees that we have a right to feel that way. But alongside that validation message is the message, it's okay to have that feeling, but it's not necessarily okay to act that way or to hurt people or say that stuff. Yeah. So it's two messages. You're allowed to have that feeling. I think kids need to know they're allowed to feel angry. Yeah. It's really important. In society, we have all these ideas about anger. Yeah. The last thing we want is a situation where we give a message to our children that we can't be with them when they're angry or they're not loved or they're not okay when they're angry. Yeah. We've got to have the message that you've got a right to feel all that stuff. Yeah. And it's not okay to hit people, hurt people or say that stuff. Yeah.
So that brings up an interesting point with you want your child to know that it's okay to have the feeling and that's not going to separate them from you. But how does time out fit into that then? Because as a parent, I for sure know that it can be so difficult to manage, even myself, the behaviour I'm experiencing of my children.
I never have that problem
separating
with my children. Of course we do. We all have moments where we think, what the heck do I do?
I just need some space.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is a big conversation.
Yeah, it's a big conversation. We could be here.
Big conversation, and there's a lot to say about time out. And as people know, I mean, blimey, the blogosphere is on fire with talk about time out. It's a hugely contentious issue. But the way that I see it, we've got the strategy of time out, and then we've got how it's used and when it's used, and the bigger picture around it. And look, I think what's happened is, so just by way of a bit of context in terms of controversy about time out, there's an American expert named Dan Siegel who has written some phenomenal books with other professionals, The Whole Brain Child, there's all sorts of fantastic stuff, and he was quoted in a Time article when he was promoting one of the books. He was quoted as saying that time out harms children.
Right. Now,
there was a massive outcry in the States, huge sort of outrage from professionals saying, hang on a minute, time out works.
Yeah.
And then he came back and he said, look, I'm not saying that time out in and of itself harms kids.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that people tend to use it too often.
Yeah.
And they tend to use it in circumstances where other strategies would be better.
Right, yeah.
So let's think about a situation where a child is starting to get angry and feels outraged, or kind of, something's been unjust or unfair. Our first point of call would not be to say to that child, you're angry, go to your room.
Okay, yeah.
In that sort of situation,
we need to validate
absolutely
that they're feeling angry because of X, Y, Z.
Absolutely. We need to be guessing where our child is at, which validation is essentially that.
Sure.
You guess the feeling that your child's having, and you label it. You say it out loud. I can see that you're feeling angry, and blimey, as we know, your child will tell you if you've got it wrong.
Yeah.
Your child will say, I'm not angry, I'm this or I'm that, I'm sad about that. But having that conversation, even if you get it wrong, having the conversation about emotions is really useful.
It's productive because they're talking about
absolutely emotions. So you're validating, you're using other strategies, and people will have heard of time in.
Yeah.
Essentially, time in is getting alongside your child, validating where they're at, giving them permission to feel that way, acknowledging that's what's happened has been upsetting, or it has been, doing all of that. And look, the way that I see it, time out is a strategy that you use occasionally, thoughtfully, and in a set of particular circumstances. And as long as the message is you are loved, it is okay to experience those feelings. I'm still here for you, I'm still available. And as long as the child is kind of secure in that relationship, then time out is not going to be harmful, it's going to be helpful. There's a lot of science behind time out. It does work, but we do need to be careful about when and how we use it.
Sure. And Melanie has actually written a long article, a full article explaining some of their thoughts around this, and we published it in an issue of OHbaby a couple of issues back, which I really should have looked up to find the exact issue when it was. But if you went on our website, you'd be able to find that article, and we'll post a link to it actually under this, because it is really quite interesting to unpackage the whole concept and make some mental notes. I know I did for sure on when and where and how to use time out. We might come back to this because time out is a big topic, but we've got a question for you from Sheena. She has a 4-year-old. When she answers questions with "I don't know." He has a great vocabulary, but that's always the answer when in trouble.
Okay.
Why?
Good question.
I don't know.
That's a really good question.
I might know.
So when kids are in trouble, that's an interesting sort of scenario. So possibly he's feeling a whole, every child's different, but when kids have gotten in trouble, at some level they're usually aware that they're in trouble.
Sure.
And so a whole lot of feelings of embarrassment and shame come along, and it's a bit of a generalisation, but particularly for boys, when they're feeling embarrassed or ashamed, they tend not to be able to be very articulate and calm and kind of say, well, actually, Mum, thanks for asking. This is how I was feeling and this is what I was doing. So what I'd suggest is that you probably save your conversations around kind of what was happening for you when that happened, and what was going on, and save those conversations for when the big feelings have faded,
died down a bit.
Because in terms of kids' development, it's really tough for them to plug into thinking about thoughts or thinking about their intentions or their actions. It's really tough to plug into that when these big feelings of embarrassment or shame have turned up.
That makes sense.
I'd wait a wee bit until things are calmer. If you need to sort of plug into some kind of logical or natural consequence, and we can talk about what that means, but many people know. If you need to plug into some kind of consequence, do that. And then when things have calmed, maybe over a glass of water or something, to say, look, I know you're not a naughty boy or a bad boy. And actually, when that stuff happened, I was thinking, what happened? Where did that come from? Can you help me to understand? Can you help me to, because I can't kind of get inside your head and understand. Can you help me figure out what was going on, so that, because I know you probably don't want to be doing that stuff. And let's work together to figure out how we can have it not happen next time.
So good. So a child, a 4-year-old is in this case, I've often wondered this, are they able to reflect back on an experience earlier in the day? So say a couple of hours have passed, are they able to think back to how I was feeling, what I was, and be reasonable like this conversation?
With some prompting and some scaffolding, they usually are. Kids, again, because of shame and embarrassment, they often want to avoid that conversation. And they'll say, I know, you don't need to talk to me about that, I know. And it's still important, and sometimes you can say to kids, look, you don't have to say much, but there's a couple of messages I want you to hear. But it's an important point that when it comes to consequences, if you're going to apply a consequence to a particular situation, with very young kids, it is important to do it immediately for that reason. Developmentally, and those of you who have tried to apply a consequence the next day or the day after, you'll realise that kids have literally almost forgotten what the thing was. So consequences need to happen fairly immediately for them to have kind of power and meaning. And when I say power, consequences is not about us being powerful and dominant as parents. Consequences are about learning. That's a really important distinction. But I think kids, 4-year-old would be capable of having a conversation a wee bit later on. The other thing to say, I get very excited about this.
I love it.
I'm an excitable kind of person.
Love an excited psychologist.
The other thing to say is that oftentimes I hear parents say, my child lacks empathy, they lack remorse.
This is a good point.
My child doesn't show any remorse. Well, actually, remorse might look different in a 4-year-old than it does in an adult. So don't be afraid that your child is a junior psychopath and is not showing any empathy or remorse. If they seem to be kind of not affected by, I mean, say your child's bopped somebody else at preschool and they just walk away and they're quite fine with that. It's, as I say, not that your child is necessarily turning into a junior psychopath. It's just that it probably was pretty rewarding for them if they bopped another child, got the toy and got to walk off. And when we stop them and we say, what the heck were you doing and what was going on, and you should be sorry about that, that child's got a complex mix of emotions going on. And just because they don't sort of have tears in their eyes and they're saying, I'm so very sorry, doesn't mean they don't feel remorseful.
Okay, right, so they should, they really underlying feelings of understanding what's going on. A line I use in our household a lot, and I'm not sure if the children are understanding, but I think they are, is, we don't treat other people how you would like to be treated. A child should be capable of understanding that if you took that approach, that, hey, you bopped little Johnny on the head in the playground, is that, would you like someone to do that to you? Is that too abstract for
No, I think for a slightly older preschooler, I mean an 18-month 2-year-old, even possibly a young 3-year-old, absolutely not. And I think with younger children, there need to be immediate, small, meaningful consequences, logical, such as.
So let's have some examples.
So if
the playground scenario at Jim Deep is a good one.
If your child walks over to another child and takes their toy and wanders off, instead of a 10-minute long discussion about why you can't take toys, it's probably simpler and more effective to say briefly, You know, unless you ask with a please, you cannot have that toy. Gently remove the toy, take it away.
Take it away.
End.
Yeah.
And then of course the child's going, oh, you know, that's not fair, because that outrage is likely to kind of manifest as a wee tantrum.
Yes.
And I think, and this is where sometimes parents struggle to be okay with kids being briefly upset in the service of a bigger goal.
Yeah, short-term pain for a long-term gain.
And I'm not suggesting our job is to intentionally upset our children. Of course not. Of course not. But we sometimes need children to be briefly unhappy with a logical or natural consequence, you know, because that's meaningful. That child is more likely to remember that. But again, just to emphasise, not suggesting we deliberately cause our children emotional pain. That's not what I'm saying.
No. Yeah, this is good. And Sheena's just asked for some consequence ideas, actually, so we were very on flick there. But so you've got the toy removal. You just gently take it away and say, unless you say please, this toy's going away. What about the hitting or sort of more physical behaviour that's not okay?
There's several. So there's several different scenarios. I mean, the overarching principles with consequences is that, as I said before, you want them to be logical and natural.
Yeah.
What I mean by logical is we want a consequence that fits with the behaviour. Yeah. So if the child hits, we'll talk about that in a moment. If they hit, we want a consequence that's logical. It makes sense. Yeah. Rather than you hit Johnny, so I'm going to take away all of your Pokemon cards or whatever it is. Yeah. Because those two things, they're not linked. Yeah. There's no kind of learning in that necessarily. So I've heard people say, if you hit, you sit.
Okay. Yeah.
I.e., if you hit, that means that you can't actively participate in what's going on. So if you hit, you sit. Yeah. And you decide, and that could be sitting off to the side for a minute within the play situation. Yeah. The other thing could be, unless you can show me gentle, we can't do any more playing. So can you show me gentle? Because we think about what the positive opposite is.
Well, that's good.
So you think about the behaviour.
The positive opposite.
And then you think about the positive opposite of that and how we can work towards the positive opposite. Yeah. So the positive opposite of hitting is showing gentleness or caring. Yeah. So how can you show me gentleness? How can you show me caring? And once you've showed me that, you can play again. And that might be that your child goes over to the other child and strokes them or pats them on the back gently or, you know, whatever the positive opposite is. Yeah. And when we think about, so that's sort of logical consequences. When we think about natural consequences, one of my favourite examples is dinner time. Yeah. You know, sometimes parents will provide sort of fruit or rice pudding or something afterwards. Yeah. The natural
chocolate pudding.
Never.
Or ice cream.
Never. I'm joking. I'm not a nutritionist, but I'm a big fan of ice cream.
So maybe ice cream. Yeah.
So just this notion that when you're facing a situation where your child's not complying and not eating their dinner fast enough, you know, you sit there and you think, what are some naturally occurring consequences? Yeah. What are some positive things that I had lined up that I could make contingent on what that child needs to do? Yeah. So it makes a heck of a lot of sense if you say to your child, goodness, we're eating now, dinner's nearly finished, we've got to then do the bath. If you haven't finished your dinner by whatever it is, or if I'm going to put the oven timer on, if it's not done by then pudding can't happen. We actually don't have time. Okay, and that's good. So that's I think an ideal. And of course, your child's not going to sit there and say, "Okay, mummy." Yeah. Of course, there's when the timer goes off and they can't have the pudding. That's not fair, you know. Yeah. And the consequence remains, at that point. And your child will learn if you're consistent and calm and predictable and the consequences are logical and fair, your child will learn very quickly. Yeah. But you have to be okay with sitting with a little bit of upset. Sure, yeah. But that's,
And generally, they get over it reasonably quickly, don't they?
As long as you don't, and see, I get so excited, Ellie.
Yeah, good. More excitement.
As long as you don't get drawn in. Yeah. So your child says, that's not fair. Yeah. I'm nearly finished and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Don't get drawn into that. You know, your child.
Don't say that
life's not fair. We're not going to get drawn into that. Because that's a recipe. So, So we want to provide a whole lot of our attention when your child is doing the thing that you want them to do. So if they're eating nicely and eating well and eating quickly, blooming heck, you pile on the attention. I love how you're eating that. That's amazing. I can see you're going to be having pudding tonight. Pile on the attention. When your child, the oven timer's gone off and your child hasn't eaten the dinner and they're moaning and groaning about how you've taken away their favourite pudding, blooming heck, that's not the time to pile on the attention.
No.
That's the time to quietly withdraw your attention. And there's this thing called an extinction burst, and this is where the geek in me comes out.
Extinction burst.
So what happens when we try to have a behaviour fade away? So things like whining. If we try to fade it away, not a big fan, there's a temporary increase in the intensity of the behaviour before it fades away. So just expect that if you quietly withdraw your attention,
it's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse.
But then it's going to get better.
And the foot's going to be stomping and they're going to be moaning and groaning. But if you can hold your attention back and quietly go and wash the dishes or whatever you were doing, that whining will fade. If you can remain, instead of getting drawn in, and in that intensity of that extinction burst, your child might pull out the big guns. It's not fair. You're a mean mum. You're this, you're that. That is not the moment to jump in with a consequence for calling you a mean mum.
So you have to ignore that.
You have to ignore that and come back to that later. When your child's calm, everybody's calm, and just remind your child of what the family rules are.
In our family, we don't say mum's mean.
Yeah, because if you swoop back in the midst of that period, if you swoop back in and start saying, "Don't you call me mean?"
Okay, you're just gonna add fuel to the fire.
And next time your child knows that the way to get your attention back is to call you mean.
Okay,
good. So they're going to do that more often.
So ignore that
as much as you can.
And an extinction burst. I like that because there's hope in that.
Absolutely.
So you're basically expecting a little bit of an increase and then a
decrease.
Yeah.
And the next day, if you have to withhold the pudding, your whining is going to be briefer.
Be less.
And if you have to do it a third day, it's going to be even less. So you've just got to play the long game.
And you bring up an interesting point there with ignore and go do the dishes. I have found in my parenting, I need to distract myself with something and just even for my own sake of calm. And doing the dishes or something, that sounds awesome, doesn't it? It's helpful. I remember in an article Miriam McCaleb wrote that when there's tantrums and whining and bad behaviour, she empties the compost whether it needs it or not. And I was like, that is so helpful. Just have something that takes me away.
Walking outside.
And going outside, brilliant. Like hang out the washing, get the washing in. All productive. So we're multitasking.
And practical things. Things that will ground you and distract you as a parent. But also a whole script, it can be helpful to have some internal stuff as well.
Sure,
and actually, this isn't fun. I'm not enjoying this. This is actually really hard.
Some mindfulness.
And some self-talk around, I'm doing this because I want my child to be a 15-year-old who knows that I mean what I say and I say what I mean.
So good.
So thinking ahead, 10 years' time, I'm helping my future self. That actually when I say to my 15-year-old, you can't have the keys to the car tonight.
Until you've eaten your dinner. No.
Can you imagine? But you know what I mean? You're paving the way for a situation where your child knows that you're in charge. And
good.
But not in a powerful, domineering way, but actually in a quiet, calm way. Your child knows you're in charge. There's, at the risk of getting even more excited, do it. Or is there a question?
There is a question, but no, that's all right. It's okay. We've got time.
I'm super excited. So if people are interested in the stance that we need to have as parents, there's a whole lot of thinking called the Circle of Security, and they've got a website and they've got some YouTube clips, and I love one of the ways that they describe what we need to be as parents. There's 4 things. We need to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind.
Right.
Bigger and stronger doesn't mean mean.
No.
Wiser and kind doesn't mean passive. But we need all of those characteristics as a parent. Bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. And I love that. It's just...
And that's the circle
of security.
Circle of security.
So if people are interested in attachment and bonding and connection, as I say, you could look up their website. They've got a couple of books, one for sort of clinicians and one for parents that's just been published. I'm not getting any sort of commission or anything.
No.
I just think it's a fabulous book.
Yeah.
And on YouTube, if you look up Circle of Security, there's a couple of brief clips that introduce that concept.
And it's just another great reminder, because as a parent, when you're in those frustrating moments, I have to remind myself, I'm actually the adult. Like, I actually have to model.
Yeah.
And that's good. I need to be the bigger, stronger, gentler,
wiser and
kind person. So good. There's a question: consequences for a 5-year-old. We're just talking about consequences for disobedience. You know, the classic scenario Rachel suggests here: tantrums when it's time to leave the playground.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So and this is one of these scenarios where the behaviour in the moment is part of a bigger picture. So what I'd suggest is that you do yourself a whole lot of favours by prepping your child before you get to the playground.
Yes.
So when you're in the car driving to the playground, you talk about, okay, so this is roughly how long we're going to stay at the playground. Roughly half an hour. The reason for that is that we've got so half an hour. I'm going to let you know when we've got 5 more minutes to go, and I'll let you know in a quiet way. I'm not going to shout and embarrass you across the playground. I'm going to come up to you and I'm going to say, we've got 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to let you know when we've got 1 more minute. And after that, you will know that it's time to finish playing with what you're playing with, and then we're going to walk quietly to the car. If you can walk quietly with me to the car, and this is where we start to think about logical and natural consequences. That will save
not
us.
bribes.
No.
Logical and natural consequences.
And logical and natural rewards.
Yes.
That actually, because it's not about bribes.
No,
it's
about
reward. And blimey,
we get rewarded.
Getting paid for a day at work, is that a bribe? No.
That's a bonus.
That's a reward
Yeah.
or an acknowledgement that actually what you've done took a bit of effort or a bit of work, and it's the same with kids.
Great.
It's not a bribe. So what I'd be saying to that child beforehand, not in the moment, is actually, if you can walk quietly with me to the car after it's time to leave, then gosh, that's going to give me an extra kind of 10 or 15 minutes. That's going to give me some extra time, and you some extra time. What do you reckon? Maybe I could put you in charge of what we listen to on the radio driving home, or maybe I could, I'm going to have a bit of extra time. Maybe we could play your favourite CD in the car on the way home, or maybe we could pull into that cafe that you love, and maybe we'll have time for a fluffy. So what I'm suggesting in any behaviour like this, and let's just be frank, that leaving swimming pools and playgrounds is challenging for 5-year-olds.
Play dates.
That is tricky. So you might need to put some effort into kind of what we call shaping up that behaviour. And in the beginning, you might need some of these tangible, what we call reinforcers or rewards. You won't need to provide a fluffy after every single playground, but just in the beginning.
Mum might need a flat white every time.
Mum might need something stronger than a flat white. But once in the beginning, when you're shaping up a new behaviour, and your new behaviour is leaving the playground quietly and calmly, if you're shaping that up, you might need some practical, tangible rewards.
Yes, it's good. And in the moment of the tantrum at the playground, I'm just going to summarise what you've said. You basically have to stick to your guns, say it is time to go now. Am I right?
Yes.
And let's go and face that extinction burst.
And support your child to walk to the car.
And then next time we have a bit more strategy
because
around
we can't have your child learn that if they throw a massive tantrum in the playground, they get to play for an extra hour. That's the last. But you're doing yourself a heck of a lot of favours by planning ahead of time, putting all of these other things into practice, and for the first few times, as I say, putting in some tangible rewards or reinforcers to shape up that behaviour, to help your child learn that when they listen to you and when they do what you ask, good things happen.
Good, so good. And we've got one more question just before we finish this morning. Friday Live, it always goes far quicker than we could talk all day, couldn't we?
Honestly.
So what we'll do is we will get Dr Melanie Woodfield back to join with us again in the future, very soon hopefully. But Rachel also asks, and I was interested in this with siblings and things happening. Her 5-year-old has now got a baby brother or sister. When she's told off, it gets really emotional and says things like, I'm stupid, I'm a bad person, I wish I was never born. That is so hard to hear as a parent. Are there any quick tips? Rachel asks, is this normal? And I'm assuming you're going to say it can be pretty normal.
It can be pretty normal, and I know we've got to finish soon, so I'll try not to get as excited.
That's all right.
But look, when I was training in psychology, we were taught this notion that every behaviour serves a function in the environment. Every behaviour. Now, I wonder about the function of that child, whatever they did that made them get told off.
Yeah.
I wonder if the function of that for that child is to bring some kind of connection with mum.
Since the baby has arrived.
I wonder about that, because sometimes kids can feel a bit displaced or a bit. So I wonder if the child, whatever that wee girl did to result in the telling off, I wonder if actually the function of that was to communicate to mum, I need something in that moment, I need to be reassured of something. Because that child obviously will know that they're loved and they're valued and they're wanted. But maybe that child in that moment needs to be reminded of that. So I always think, what's the function of what my child, what kind of function has that? Because hitting, that's one behaviour, but that could serve 10 different functions. It could serve the function of getting a toy. It could serve the function of getting out of having to do something else. It could serve the function of getting some reminders from mum about some things. So think about the function of what your child's done in that moment. Think about what your child needs to hear and needs from you in that moment. And this is why I say we can't just send kids to time out.
No.
Blanketly across the board. We have to think, what does my child need in that moment? So I guess looking at the bigger picture, it's not a simple answer. But
no, it's not a simple answer, but an encouragement is that it does happen a bit in this situation when new siblings come along. The older sibling is looking for extra connection. And do you validate at that point? You know, so if your child said to you, I'm a bad person, what do you say? You just come straight in with...
I'd remind them of important messages. And I wouldn't challenge it in terms of, you're wrong, I love you. I would say, you know, it's really important that you know, and it might be hard to hear at the moment, you might be feeling, you know, have some big feelings going on. I love you very much, you are loved, you are wanted. Things have changed in our family, things are a bit different at the moment, and it can be really hard when changes happen. It can be hard to get used to that. And I love you. You know, I understand sometimes you might feel like I spend lots of time with your sister, blah, blah, blah. And again, coming back to that point, that big conversation might need to happen when everybody's calmed down. And you can, put some practical things in place in terms of mummy-daughter time or special time. I mean, that's sort of stating the obvious, really, and I'm sure this person's already doing those things. But some lovely times of connection regularly throughout the day, 5 minutes that just belongs to mummy-daughter time, or, you know, just because I think we tend to get into the verbal stuff as parents and reassuring people, you're loved, you're this, but actually, you know, actions sometimes speak louder than words. And 5 minutes of dedicated time is going to give all those messages to your child. And that's so encouraging. I think it's a good point to leave it, although we could talk all day, so we'll get Mel back. 5 minutes of dedicated focused time, 10 minutes if you've got that, and you know, maybe it builds, is so much more valuable and precious than we give it credit for, isn't it? Absolutely. 5 minutes of good quality time with our children. Thank you so much for joining us, Melanie. This has been great. It's so good to have you here, and we will get Dr. Melanie back in to talk to us on Friday Live, and I'll also share some links underneath this video of some interesting articles that Melanie has written for us before, and some of the concepts you were talking about. We can pop those in the comment section. So thank you for joining us at Friday Live. We're back here again next Friday with Dorothy Wade, talking all things babies and sleep related. So do join us then next week. Have a great afternoon, and we will see you next time.